What's up, guys? Welcome back to the shop. In today's video, we're making an Akiri out of some bolt nuts. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take these nuts and I'm going to rip the zinc stripping off of them with some muriatic acid. If you ever try this yourself, be sure to do it in a well ventilated area because muriatic acid stinks and it's very bad for you. So next thing we're going to do while that does that is we're going to make our canoe. So for this build, I'm not just going to toss it into a can. I'm going to make it into a canoe and I'm going to layer it with a high carbon steel in the center for our cutting edge. And to do that, I need to make a canoe. So after I make my canoe, I'll go on ahead and give it a couple layers of some white spray paint. The white spray paint keeps the inside of the contents from welding to the actual canister, and it helps in an easier release. Canoes aren't always the easiest to release compared to regular canisters, but they do release a lot easier than having to grind it off or having to peel it off without that extra layer of protection from the white spray paint. So I definitely recommend to always do that. And I'm going to be pairing it with some steel powder with 2% nickel from Maritime Knife Supply. Here I'm going to put my 1084 core in there, and we're going to go on ahead and put those lock washers back in. I'm trying to get a repeatable pattern. That's why I'm using a straight pattern versus just tossing them in there. So I'm trying to layer them to look kind of in line, and I'm looking for a specific pattern. What pattern, I'm not quite sure yet because I've never tried this before, but I do want it to look like it's meant to be there. I don't know if that makes sense. So first things first, I'm going to go on ahead and give it a squeeze. Now on one of these, doesn't matter where you squeeze from first, it's going to be the same because the canister is made all from my own welding and no factory welds, but I press from the top out of habit. After a couple of presses, the canister in and of itself is going to start wanting to peel away, and the weak spots are going to be showing up, like this lid right here that's already coming off by itself. And with a little bit of extra help, it can start peeling away. Here, as you can see, the inside of the can is actually pretty well welded. And instead of trying to rip it off while welding as I normally do, I'm just going to go on ahead and try to peel it off with the grinder. And a little bit of elbow grease with a chisel, and it should come right out. If it wasn't for the white spray paint that we put in at the beginning, this would definitely not be coming out as easy or coming out at all, since it would have probably all welded together into one piece with the mild steel jacket on the outside. Some people prefer to weld off the jacket from the outside. I myself don't. I'd rather just peel it off because all that grinding, all that extra dust, I feel like it's unnecessary. But some people prefer to do it that way, and you know, to each their own, I say. As long as you're having fun with the process and you like your end result, that's all that really matters. So from here on, I'm just gonna start pressing it out. I'm trying to get a nice even consistency. The shape of an Akiri is basically a rectangle, so there's not really much movement to it, and that I chose to make an Akiri out of this specifically because I wanted to see what that pattern looked like undistorted. So all I'm really doing is just drawing out the length of this billet, and then I'll start working on the actual handle once I'm happy with the thickness. And reaching that thickness is a bit of a pain with this press, since this is an older video. This was before I did the upgrades to the press, so it presses a little uneven, but I do manage to get to a roughly 1/8 thickness. And here I'm starting to do the handle. The handle is going to be in full tank construction, so I'm just forging out a bit of it. In hindsight, it should have been better to cut in a notch for my handle versus just hammering it in, and because of that I end up with a knife that's a little bit wider at the tip, I guess, even though there's no tip at the front part of the knife versus the back end where my handle is. It's a little bit thinner there and a little bit wider towards the front. But these little mistakes are where we learn to better our craft. Nowadays, I like to cut in that transition just to make it crisper and have a better transition. So here all I'm doing is forging that tang to the correct width and length that I need. And after that, all that's left to do is clean it up and get it ready for our heat treat. So first things first, I'm gonna give it a good pre-grind with the 2x72. And as you can see here, I have my finger taped up because I probably cut it. I do not recall how I did that, but I definitely did that. And I'm profiling my knife. This is just standard profiling with a 36 grit belt, making quick work of the actual knife and ripping off a lot of steel. A lot of people ask me what kind of belts I use. I tend to use Red Label abrasives, and that's not an ad because they don't want to pay me, but I use them and I have no issues with them, so I continue to use them. If any belt companies want to hit me up and want to pay me to use their product, I would be more than happy to. But until that day comes, I'm more than likely just going to use Red Label abrasives because they work well, the price is good, and they haven't failed me yet, other than, wanting to sponsor me. So if you guys want to sponsor me, hit me up. I'd be more than happy to go that route with you guys. So moving forward on the build, I am prepping up my handle material. Now, I normally prep my handle material after I heat treat, but in this case, I had ran out of propane, so I could not heat treat, but I could work on the handle, so I decided to prep up all my materials for my handle ahead of time, and the next day I would go out and get some propane. So I ended up going that route, and I prepped up my handle material, which in this case are some blue liners with some black paper micarta. I really like the look of black paper micarta, and if you leave it a little rough sanded, it has a very good grip for any kind of kitchen knives or any kind of knives in general. But I really do like to use it for my kitchen knives because I like that contrast, especially with the different colored liners in there. This time it was blue, but it could have been orange or red, and they really pop out and contrast very well against that black micarta. So it's definitely one of my favorites to use, and I always like to have some in stock in the shop. So with all that complete, it's time to go into our quench, and it was a nice and successful quench. And after a little while in the oven, approximately 2 cycles of 2 hours at 400 degrees, I'm ready for my hand sand and my final grind. After my final grind, I go on ahead and give it some good loving with some Rhino Wet sandpaper, and all that's left to do is get our handle glued up. In this case, I'm using 5-minute epoxy, but nowadays I don't use that anymore because I had a lot of issues with it. So I use West Systems epoxy. It works a lot better, and if you want to try that out, I have a link in my description where you can pick some of that up on Amazon. It's an affiliate link, and the channel gets a little bit of money in return for the purchase. So if you want to check that out, definitely do. And with that, our handle is ready for our final grind. On this handle, I didn't really put too much shaping into it. It ended up being a little bit more squared and blocky than my handles are nowadays, but take into account this knife was done probably anywhere from 1.5 to 2 years ago. I don't really recall on top of my head, but my handle styles have changed over the years, and so I probably wouldn't do this handle nowadays, but I definitely did do them like that before. Nowadays I go more towards having a bit of a rounder and a wider handle than I did back in the days. And with all that done, all that's left is to etch out our pattern. One of the reasons why I really like to use micarta as well is because it does not absorb the liquid, so I can etch with the handle on, and it gives me a nice clean etch all over the knife and on the spine. Overall, I consider this a cool little project knife. It is a little bit smaller than what I would normally do, and it's even small for an Akiri, but I was aiming for the pattern, which I am very happy with. So overall, it came out great. I'm very happy with it. It looks very, very cool, and it's definitely a unique, one-of-a-kind knife that would look good in any kitchen. As always, guys, I really appreciate you guys watching, and I will catch y'all in the next one. Peace.